Hi. So, as Peter said, today's Bible reading is taken from John chapter 10. You can find it on page 1166. And we're just starting at the big 10 at the end of the first column. Very truly I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of the sheepfold. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father."
It's time for our Bible talk. You might find it useful to have John 10 open in front of you. It's page 1166. I will refer to some of those verses. The topic today, or the title today, is How Would You Repair Authorities? Now, if you were here last week, you'll know we just started a new series. Last week we were thinking about how would you repair people. There's a presupposition in the question. What that means is it assumes something, doesn't it? How would you repair authorities? It kind of assumes that they need repairing, don't they? And actually, the news this week has given me a very easy job of convincing you that they need repairing. So those who work at the highest levels of government disappoint. Royalty can disappoint. Sports stars can disappoint. Lots of people that we might look up to and maybe even feel we ought to look up to, or we ought to be able to look up to, can end up disappointing. Now, last time, as I said, we looked at how could you repair people. The reason we were doing this is a survey was done asking people what they thought was wrong with the world, and 25% of people asked said that they thought people were the problem with the world. It'd be interesting to know if those 25% thought that they were included in the people that were wrong with the world, or if they just thought it was everyone else. I don't know. So anyway, so 25% of people said people, what needs to be fixed or repaired. But 20% said authorities. So 20% of people said actually what needs to be repaired is authorities, and that's why we're thinking about this now. Brilliantly, Jesus has a lot to say on this, and particularly has quite a bit to say here in John 10, which is why we're looking at it. And I'm hoping we're going to see three things, and these are the three things, or we're going to think about three things. Clive, could we just go ahead? Thank you. There we go. First, we're going to see Jesus identifies the problem. Then we're going to think a little bit about how people try and solve this problem. And then we're going to see what Jesus does about it. So we'll take the first of those. Jesus identifies the problem. I think I might have used this picture once before, but I love it because 2 + 2 = 5. But also, brilliantly, John 10 talks a lot about sheep and shepherds. Who wouldn't love a picture of a sheep in a classroom? It's brilliant. So it is cute. Lewis, nail on the head. It is brilliant. Jesus, as the chapter opens, Jesus is speaking to some people, and it's actually some of the same people that we saw last week. You see verse 1, so if you use one of the church Bibles, column 1, where the big tent is partway down there, it says, very truly I tell you, Pharisees, he's speaking to these people, the Pharisees, they were authorities in their day. They were part of the religious establishment, the religious authorities, and Jesus is speaking to them. They were around last week, if you were here last week, and he was speaking to them as well as others last week as well. So he's speaking to them, but right away, Jesus is talking about shepherds and sheep. I think, well, surely he should have been talking to farmers if he's getting into talking about shepherds and sheep. But what we could easily miss is that actually back then, and in the ancient Near East, it was a common way of talking about those in authority and those that they look after. So not literal farmers, but people in positions of authority and those that they're looking after. And that was particularly true that it was within Israel, within the Jewish people, that they spoke in that way. We'll see that a little bit more in a moment. But this problem, there's a problem that Jesus identifies here, and he starts to talk about it in terms of shepherds and sheep to help people see the issue. But that's not a new way of thinking about it, or a new way of talking about it. It's actually something from hundreds of years earlier, actually, in Jewish writing from lots earlier. Now, we're going to look at just a few verses from a book written several hundred years before Jesus is speaking. It's contained in our Old Testament. It's a book called Ezekiel, written by a guy called Ezekiel. And in chapter 34, he talks all about shepherds and sheep. But again, he's not talking about literal, out in the field shepherds and sheep. He's talking about the rulers, the authorities, and those that they're supposed to be governing. Now, Clive, there's 4 slides here. I'm going to read it out. Clive, I'm going to pause between the second and the third one. But here's what Ezekiel said. He said this, and Ezekiel's telling the people what God says. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourselves with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You've ruled them harshly and brutally. Well, what a catalogue of sort of accusations against them, and it sounds like they're a disaster, doesn't it? What's God going to do about it? Well, we'll just skip ahead a few verses, and this is where we need the next one. Thanks, Clive. To verse 10, and here's what God says he's going to do about it. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I'm against the shepherds and will hold them accountable for my flock. I will remove them from tending the flock so that the shepherds can no longer feed themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths, and it will no longer be food for them. It continues. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he's with them, so I will look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered. So not only does God, speaking through Ezekiel there, say he's identified the problem and what's going on, but the remedy is that he himself is going to step in to be the shepherd. He himself is going to save these people. So that was something written hundreds of years before Jesus. Jesus identifies the same problem. We can maybe see it even just this week in the news, similar problems. But actually, I've got another example from a little while ago, and I've got a painting here. It was painted by someone called William Holman Hunt in 1851. You can see it down in the Manchester City Art Gallery. It's called the Hyaline Shepherd. I think I may have shown this picture a few years ago, so some of you may have seen it before. But if you know about farming and farming techniques, and particularly farming techniques in 1851, which probably not many of us are experts in, but you would immediately spot that this shepherd is doing everything wrong. Everything's wrong. Like some of the sheep have fallen over and need help up, but they're just lying there. One of the sheep's wandering off, isn't it, into the cornfield. You can see that there. He's got his back turned to them, so he's missing all of this. There's a lamb there eating an apple. Apparently that's very bad for lambs to eat apples, I hear. I think one of these plants is also poisonous to sheep, that's at the front. So there's various things that we maybe don't immediately spot, but basically the guy's a disaster. He's a disaster. And he's got other things on his mind, I think, rather than his flock. I don't know what William's trying to get across. But basically he's a disaster. But here's the thing. William Holman Hunt was painting that picture not because he thought farmers were bad. He was trying to say the authorities in his day were being like this. It was a political message in the painting, actually, just like we've got here. And it's a disaster. But notice he's the hireling shepherd. He doesn't actually own the sheep, just being hired in to look after them. Not doing a great job. So it's a problem in Jesus' day that Jesus identifies. We've seen it's a problem centuries before in Israel. It's a problem in our day. 1851, people could see it as a problem. It's actually a problem that's just there. It's endemic. It's there all the time. Here's what Jesus says about it in verse 8. Look at verse 8 with me. So we now, column 2, towards the top, where the little 8 is. He says, all who have come before me are thieves and robbers. Describing these people as thieves and robbers. They're supposed to be the shepherds. He's describing them as thieves and robbers. But look at verse 10. The thief only comes to steal and kill and destroy. So not only the thieves and stealing what's rightfully belongs to others, but talking about killing and destroying now sort of ratchets it up even more. But in contrast, second half of verse 10, the thief comes to steal, kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. So there's a stark contrast between those two types of authority or leaders or shepherds. So we might ask, well, why? Why are leaders back then so bad? Why are leaders in our day so bad? Well, the problem is this, that leaders are a bit like you and me. Yes, they've got a position of authority. Yes, they've been put on a pedestal. Yes, they've been raised up. But they are humans like me and you. They are frail and weak and have all kinds of failings like me and you. And it is so common, isn't it, that we put someone on a pedestal, we look up to them only to discover they are not what we'd hoped for. But that's what you and me are like as well. If it was us on the pedestal, we'd be letting people down as well. And if you were here last week, Jesus identified what the problem is. He said there's a heart problem. It doesn't mean our blood pump. It means that there's a problem inside in the bit of you that makes you you. And I think last week I used that quote. It's not original to me, but I think it brilliantly sums it up. And it says this, the heart of the human problem is the problem of the human heart. I love the way that goes to the heart of it. It's something within us. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we'll just spend a few moments now thinking about how people try to solve the problem. This is my second thing that I want to see. How people try and solve the problem. Thanks, Clive. And here you see it's a little sticking plaster stuck over something. Actually, it looks like it may have been an injection, doesn't it? But anyway, stuck over whatever's under there. Now, how do we? We've identified, haven't we? Authorities can be pretty dodgy, pretty flawed. How do we deal with that? Well, there's one response that comes pretty easy, comes quite naturally to us. We think, I'm just not going to listen to the authorities. I'm going to do my own thing. Have you ever had this experience? Maybe at work, you were very happy to do a task at work until your boss says you must do it. And then you don't want to do it. It's like, I was happy to do it before, but now I'm being told I must do it. It's like, I don't want to. Or when you're a child and your parent says you must tidy your room. Maybe you think, I did need a bit of a sort out. I was going to tidy it, but now being told I must do it, I don't want to do it. I dig my heels in. I walk into the park and I see the sign that says, do not walk on the grass. What am I itching to do? Thinking, the path goes quite a long way around. It'd be so much quicker to nip over there. And then, I don't think that's just me. I mean, it is me, but I don't think it's just me. I think you can probably identify with some of that. What do we do? Well, authorities are corrupt, authorities are dodgy. Let's not listen to authority. It comes easy to us because we're rebellious at heart. I wonder if you've heard this. It's a very popular idea. I think even more popular these days, perhaps. I wonder if you heard this idea. No one can tell me how to live. No one can tell me how to live. No one has the authority to tell me how to live. Now, our colleagues at work, our friends, our family might not say that out loud, but they might live that way. I mean, some of them will say it out loud, won't they? But we live that way, and we know the temptation to live that way. No one can tell me how to live. Now, we're going to do a little thought experiment here. Just have a little think about the person next to you. You can pick who you want. If you're not really close to someone, just pick someone a bit further away. The person next to you on the row there, would you be prepared to give that person total control over your life? Total control over your life. They can tell you what to wear, where to go, what to do, everything. Total control over their life. Some husbands here thinking, well, the what to wear thing, I really don't have, you're not going out in that, are you? Unless you're Peter, because he's so smartly turned out all the time, Peter. That probably never happens to you. But would you be prepared to give total control of every area of life to that person? Now, maybe you're sitting by a wife or husband, you love them dearly. You already are very, keen to hear their ideas on things, keen to consult with them. Would you be prepared to put everything to do with your life in their hands? What about the person 3 rows behind you? What about someone who's not quite so close? Our instinct, I think, is to say no, isn't it? Our instinct is to think, I'm not sure. That would be a big risk, wouldn't it? And why would we think, well, I know best, don't we? I know best about me. There may be somebody I know really well, maybe they know me really well, but I know best about me. But do you know best? Do you make better decisions than they would? If you flip that whole thing that we just did, would they give you control? Well, no, they wouldn't. And maybe the better they know you, the less likely they are to do that. What about the person 3 rows away? Well, they definitely wouldn't. In fact, I won't quite go this far, but you could say no one in this room thinks that you should have authority over them. I won't quite go that far. But do you know, it would be a very big thing, wouldn't it, to give someone else authority over every area of your life. And it'd be a big thing to give you that responsibility over somebody else's life. Now you might think, yeah, but Peter, but I still know best for me. We're talking about someone else here. I still know best for me and my life. But do you? Are you in total agreement with everything that your 10-year-old, 10 years ago, self-thought? So if you put yourself back where you were in 2012, do you still think in the same way about everything that you did in 2012? Do you think that every decision you made back then was wise and good? Do you look back at photos of things you went out in public, people saw you dressed in it, and think, oh, that was a sharp dresser? Or do you sort of look through your feet? Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But I don't think many of us would look back at ourselves 10 years ago and think in every way we got it right. We look back at some of what we did and we think, I was a bit daft there. I was a bit foolish, I maybe shouldn't have done that. I could have been wiser. But here's something to think about. Yourself in 10 years' time, if we're still here, will look back at you now and think the same way. So you in 2032 will look back at you in 2022 and think, what were you thinking? So we think, I know best for me, but do we? But it's even more serious than that. If we just live as our own authority, I'll be my own authority, I will decide for me, it's also a disaster. And it's a disaster because we have freedom to do whatever we want. I think, well, what's wrong with that, Peter? Freedom to do whatever I want. Sounds brilliant. But we're free to do some daft things as well, aren't we? What do we do with that freedom? We follow our inner passions. We follow the things we really want to do. We indulge ourselves. We don't say no to ourselves. And that so easily can lead to addictive behaviour. Behaviour where we're telling ourselves, I can stop whenever I want. But can you? An addiction, rather than being the freedom that we thought we were going to have, addiction becomes a prison that we've imprisoned ourselves in. And I'm not just talking about drink or drugs or sex or gambling or those sort of addictions. It can be rage or anger. It can be greed. It could be for food, but it could be greed for other things. It could be materialism. It could be, well, ... filling your own thing in the blank there, because we have this tremendous creativity given by God, but we can use it to be creative about foolish things as well, and creative about sin. So, how do people try and solve the problem? Well, what we end up doing is just a sticking plaster solution. We're sticking something over the problem, but we're not dealing with the heart issue. Well, let's, with the rest of our time, just see this final thing, this third thing. What does Jesus do about it? Let's come back to John 10. And we left off in verse 10 there. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but great contrast. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Verse 11, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. In contrast with the hired hand, just like in that painting we saw earlier, verse 12, the hired hand is not the shepherd, does not own the sheep. So when he sees a wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. The wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he's the hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. In contrast, Jesus cares everything for the sheep. Verse 11, I'm the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Lays down his life. Now, when we think about authorities, I've talked about how bad they all are, but we can maybe think of times where there's been an authority in our lives that was a good thing. Maybe a boss who was really a sort of servant leader, really served the people who were working for them well, or a team leader maybe, We might think of parents who laid down their lives for us, really went out of their way to make our lives better and to do what was best for us. And we might say they laid down their life for others. And Jesus does that, but verse 11 isn't just talking about it in that kind of a way, like an expression. He's literally talking about laying down his life for the sheep. He goes on in verse 14 onwards to talk about this. He talks about the power of what he's saying in trying to persuade wayward sheep to come back to the pasture. He says, I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. He says, they will listen to my voice, in verse 16. He wants to persuade them to come to safety. But again in verse 15, he again says, I lay down my life for the sheep. Now, if we know the events of the end of Jesus' life and how Jesus died, it appears that events are beyond Jesus' control. He's arrested. He's flogged very brutally. He's spat upon. He's mocked. Nails are driven through his hands and feet. He gets a spear in his side. He dies this death on a cruel Roman cross in agony. And it appears that it's all beyond his control. But look what he says in verse 17. I lay down my life only to take it up again. He's talking about his resurrection there. 18. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. Now here's real authority, isn't it? Authority even over death. But how's he using that authority? He's using that authority to lay down his life for us. The Bible says he's taken a punishment we deserve for our sinful ways and sinful heart. Now, as we have looked at things that have come out in the news this week, I don't know what the outcome of this investigation into parties happening at number 10 Downing Street will be, but it would not surprise me at all if some heads roll. Some people lose their jobs. I mean, there's already been resignations around it and people having to do public apologies and things. But it would not surprise me if there's resignations and people resigning to protect other people or so that other people do keep their jobs. But I would imagine that may well be a forced thing. They might not have a lot of choice about it. Resign or you're going to get sacked kind of thing. But that's not what's going on here, is it? Jesus has willingly stepped into human history. Willingly stepped in to be that shepherd that Ezekiel talked about. That God would come himself to shepherd his sheep. He would come himself to be the authority that was so lacking. The shepherd that the sheep needed. And Jesus comes as the one who has real moral authority. Who really can be trusted and really could be trusted with our lives. So remember when I said, could you trust the person sitting next to you, your right or left or 3 rows behind or wherever? Jesus is the only person that you could really truly say, I have no qualms about doing that. I'm not worried about doing that. I totally can trust him with my life. He would always decide and recommend and want what is best for me. He can totally call the shots because I know he'll do the best job possible. A perfect job. He's the only one who has the real moral authority to be able to do that. And even more startling is the Bible says Jesus does that even though he really knows you, the inner secret you that no one else knows, the flawed you. Warts and all, he knows you, and he still loved you enough to say, what he said in verse 11. And we've got it here on the screen again for us. And the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. And he's prepared to do that for you and for me, even though he knows what we're really like. Now, for some of us, we've maybe heard this many times, for some of us this might be quite new ideas. Let me encourage you, whether this is a new idea or an old idea, to keep thinking about this, the wonder of it. If this is quite a new idea to you, you might be interested in our Life Explored course. It was mentioned earlier. It's just a short 3-week course. It'll be about an hour and 15 minutes each time. It's going to be on a Wednesday evening. It starts not this Wednesday, but a week on Wednesday. There'll be a little bit of video. We'll look at a little bit of Luke's Gospel together. There'll be opportunity for questions, and you really can ask anything. You don't have to be a Christian to come. It's actually brilliant for people who are a Christian and want a little refresher on Luke's Gospel, but brilliant if you're fresh to these things and looking at these things for the first time or coming back to these things after some time. So let me encourage you to think about that. Speak to me if you want to know a little bit more info. Our time has gone, so let me pray. Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Father, we thank you that as we look at a world where authority is so compromised and is so disappointing at times, we thank you that Jesus is not, and the more we look at him, the more astonishing we see. We see that he has the moral authority. We see that he does the right thing in every situation. And he's the only one really equipped to have total authority in our lives. And he can even do that better than we can do it ourselves. Father, I pray that you'd help us to ponder these things, to think about them more. And if these things are new to us, Father, I pray that you'd help us to understand these things better. That you would help us to see what it means for you to have authority in our lives. And you'd help us to see what a blessing that is and could be. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.